So welcome everyone. Tonight we're going to be discussing something that's a little different. I didn't know exactly how to label this, but it's taken from the two versions of Cosmos, the one by Carl Sagan and the one by Neil deGrasse Tyson, about how you don't know the value of an individual unless you give them the opportunity to advance, to learn, to contribute. And if you cut that short for a variety of reasons, you don't know how much you've lost. So that's what we're discussing. But first, we'll cover the news. The James Webb Space Telescope continues its alignment of the mirrors to its individual instruments. It has 4 primary instruments. They've only done one so far, the NIRCam. They've now switched over and they're starting the alignment for the MIRI instrument, the mid-infrared. NIRCam is closer to visible light. Mid-infrared, MIRI is obviously deeper into infrared. And it uses a cryocooler or cryogenic refrigerator to chill the instrument down to a small number of digits of Kelvin. And originally we were told that the Webb uses a fixed supply of helium to keep its propulsion tanks basically filled up with pressure so that the fuel goes out the back end as it should, and that has a limited supply, but that the cryocooler has a fixed supply of coolant. Don't worry about it. It's still helium, but apparently it's helium itself. So they're using helium as if it's the air conditioning refrigerant to keep the instrument cool. And if it gets too cold, then they can apparently turn on some heaters to warm it back up. But right now they're trying to chill it down to its lowest temperature before they start doing any calculations as to alignment of it. And if you ever want to know the current status of the James Webb Space Telescope, deployments, alignments, calibrations, things like that, the Webb blog at NASA is a good place for that. You may not get all the techie details, but it'll give you a general understanding of what's going on. And I did send that an email that I sent around, but here I have another item that I didn't send around in the email, and I posted that link in the chat. This is by Launchpad Astronomy on YouTube. It's a very good detailed explanation of the mirror alignment process and how it works, and the selfie that it took, and the fact that the secondary mirror is fully movable, both in, out, left, right, up, down. This picture is not exactly accurate. If you see these bottom 2 struts, the bottom 2 struts are actually lined up with the center of the mirrors that is directly above. So it's a graphical representation, it's not real. But these 2 struts should be more towards the center of these 2 mirror segments. And then the top strut is right above the center of the top center segment. That explains why, when you look at that diffraction limited image, you see 6 bright struts and 2 dim struts. The 6 bright struts are, let's see, 6-sided mirrors, and you have 3, so that gives you your 6. And then you have the 2 struts at the bottom, which don't show up as brightly on the mirror segments towards the top, which explains why they're dim and out to the sides. So that explains the spider web struts that you see in the diffraction limited image. If you happen to own a Newtonian style telescope with a suspended secondary mirror, you'll know that those sort of veins in the image are that's just part of the program. And if you don't want to see them, you focus on something that's a little dimmer. Well, in the case of the Webb, they wanted to focus on something that was really bright because they wanted to see the diffraction lines of the struts to know that they're in perfect focus for the particular wavelength of light that they were observing down into the infrared. So as they switch over to MIRI, it's going to have a different focus. And hopefully they'll remember the settings of each one of them as they switch from one instrument to the other. But if you remember from the presentation I gave on the James Webb Space Telescope, all the instruments see the collected light at the same time. They're just in different parts of the large field of view. Okay, coming off the web, we'll go to something that Joanne provided that I found fascinating. The March 21st NASA Astronomy Picture of the Day, or APOD. Looks kind of like a tornado. This is the image taken over a 1-year period of time. You've known that you can take images of the sun over a year and you get this lovely elliptical shape. But if you take images over 24 hours and you take a slice horizontally out of each one of the images, and then you layer them vertically, and you organize them by date, and you align them by day and night, you can actually see daylight, nighttime, the moon going overhead, different bright things showing up in the sky, clouds. You can see all of that information, and you can see by the widening and narrowing, you can actually see the seasonal change. So you can see summer solstice, the autumnal equinox being equal at both sides, and then you can see the spring and winter solstices at the maximals. So I just found that to be interesting. I included it, I'll link to it in the email. They were referring to it as a kilogram. I think when it's a picture, when you're actually capturing the data as an image, then it's a kilogram. I don't know what they call it when it's a predictive computer simulation, like Sky and Telescope used to include annually with a magazine subscription, where you could see, minus the daytime brightness and minus the clouds, it would show you where the moon's going to be, what time it arises. Because if you look along the bottom, we actually have time of day. So I just found that to be fascinating. Thank you, Joanne, for sharing that. And I watched the This Week in NASA. They showed what went on with the 2 astronauts that were outside the ISS this week doing some repairs and upgrades. And the funny part at the end of their spacewalk was one of the astronauts started to develop water inside of his spacesuit helmet. This has happened before when the material they use to add something that will prevent the face masks, the visors from fogging up, actually became an irritant to their eyes. And when you tear up, when your eyes get that irritated and they tear up in 0G, you wind up basically having large masses of water around your eyes and face because there's no gravity to pull the tears down. So they, when they ended the spacewalk, they took one of the astronauts and immediately took his helmet and spacesuit off, and the other astronaut just hovered in the background, waiting for the call for next. And NASA has confirmed so far 5,000 exoplanets. Now, not all of these are of the right size or the right distance from their parent star to be Earth-like or to have a human habitable environment, but the number is just growing every time they do more observations. And so far, if you remember, they are only looking in 2 small patches of the sky to find these. This is obviously an artist's rendering, but the interesting part is down further in this article, there's a video, and in the video, it actually shows you the area of the sky that they've been looking at for exoplanets, and it makes a little ring appear wherever and when it found an exoplanet, and there's a little calendar year indicator going across on the top. And as time goes by, you see bursts of detection of exoplanets. And when big chunks of data would come back from the Kepler probe, you would see, 100 plus just show up. And the interesting thing is, based upon the size and distance from its parent star, they made a little sound, and the pitch of the sound changes, indicating what kind of exoplanet they found. But since it's video with audio, and we know how well that goes, I've given you the link in the email. You can watch it using the local resources of your computer at much higher fidelity. And this one was interesting. If you remember, they rolled out the Space Launch Systems Artemis rocket for ground testing. And in other words, they're going to pressurize it up, which they did this week, and then they're going to actually strap it down and let it fire off its engines to prove that it doesn't go boom when you do that. Well, it's sitting on the pad, but there's a SpaceX launch that's supposed to be coming up next. And apparently the Artemis ground test is running over. So they've bumped the SpaceX commercial astronaut launch out in order to allow the Artemis to stay on the pad for a longer period of time. And I think that this is probably going to give SpaceX some impetus to, we need our own launch pad. So look for that in the near future. We're tired of waiting on others. And this one I found to be a commercial business indicator. SpaceX used to have a rideshare contract with a sub-rideshare company called Spaceflight Incorporated. And Spaceflight Incorporated would do all the hand-holding with the universities and the small companies wanting to launch very small satellites, CubeSats and things like that. And they would do the hand-holding, and then they'd bundle up a bunch of them and launch them on a SpaceX Falcon 9. If you look at the last time they did this for spaceflight, there were over 100 small satellites all launched on a single Falcon 9. And I'm guessing that SpaceX went, how much did we make off of launching 100 satellites? We can do better. So they canceled their longtime contract with spaceflight, and spaceflight will have to go looking for a proton or neutron rocket from the folks down in New Zealand to launch their small rideshare program. And SpaceX, who's always had their own rideshare program, but usually did it for larger satellites, is going to start offering rideshare directly to smaller satellite requesters, which means the smaller requesters are going to have to pay more money for their launches. But it's just a change in how business is being done. And also in the realm of business, this week's news has a couple of fallouts of Roscosmos and what's going on in Ukraine. OneWeb, who has the competitive constellation satellite system to SpaceX's Starlink, used to launch on Russian rockets. And they used to launch them from either Russia or South America, depending upon what orbital positioning they wanted. Russia backed out of launching them for OneWeb, because OneWeb being kind of Great Britain related, and Great Britain with sanctions on Russia, so Russia wants to stick them back, and France is the same way, so they're pulling out of South America, which in French Guiana is France, and the UK, which is OneWeb, so Roscosmos pulled out as the launch vehicle for OneWeb. Then there's SpaceX. So SpaceX and OneWeb have struck up an agreement where SpaceX is going to launch OneWeb satellites. Now you might think, why would they want to launch their own competitor satellites? And the thing is that OneWeb is at a much higher altitude with a longer transit delay, a longer ping time than SpaceX Starlink. And OneWeb is focusing on big businesses, whereas Starlink is focusing on individuals or small businesses. So they're kind of doing the same thing at different elevations with different target customers. So SpaceX basically said, sure, we'll be glad to take the money. So it'd be interesting to see how many satellites they used to launch per Roscosmos launch versus SpaceX Falcon 9 launch. But all of the OneWeb satellites due to be launched in 2022 for the rest of the year will be launched via SpaceX. And another fallout with Roscosmos, the European Space Agency, given that the European Union, is into sanctions against Russia for what they're doing in Ukraine. Russia came back and said, we don't want to launch your stinking ExoMars probe. Also, we're not supplying you the instruments that were going to be on your ExoMars. Take that. And ExoMars said, well, we can only launch to Mars about once every 2 years. And we're going to miss this year's window because of this. So we'll just suspend ExoMars. The program is still defined. It's still intact. It still has funding, but they just don't know what they're going to do to launch it this year. Now, if all they needed was a launch vehicle, they could go over and tap on the shoulder of SpaceX and say, have you got a Falcon Heavy we can use to get this thing off to Mars? And I'm sure they can swing a deal. The problem is there's also instrumentation that Russia was going to provide on the spacecraft, namely the pad from which the ExoMars rover would journey out. So the bottom half of the landing vehicle was coming from Roscosmos, but they can't get that anymore. So that's why they just suspended it. So we'll see what they do. Maybe NASA will make the landing pad and SpaceX will be the launch vehicle with a Falcon Heavy, but we'll see. Things, they are changing.
All business.
It's just business, nothing personal. No. And I finally got the video edited and posted on YouTube for the online session we did 2 weeks ago. Everything just kept coming up in front of it. I went off to Orlando for 2 days. We went back down to Big Cypress. I had to make 2 trips up to West Palm Beach to help my brother-in-law with his business computer. And things just kept getting in the way, but I finally got it done earlier today and posted it. So any other news items that I might have missed? Any other comments before we get into tonight's program? Okay, then. Okay, so tonight we're going to talk about something I called incalculable loss, and we'll get into the definition of that. So tonight's topic is a little different. It's not really focused on science, technology, or space exploration. And depending upon the level of discussion and conversation, this may be a short or a long presentation. So far, I'm going to guess it's either going to be quite a bit shorter than usual, or it's going to be long, based upon the level of discussion. So it's more about a predicament that human existence has and our effects on one another, which leads to greater effects on all of us. And ultimately, how that effect hinders the advancement of the human species. We'll get back to our usual topics kind of next week. So what do I mean by incalculable? We're very much into calculating things, quantities, weights and volumes, distances, durations. We calculate lots of things. The reason why we calculate them is because we want to know how much do we currently have and how much do we have left to do or left to go. Even governments do this. How much money do we have in the economy? How much inflation do we have in the economy? If you're a military, it's how big is the opposition? And after some strikes, you go, how much is left? So it's all about those calculations. So there's a presumption that all of these values that we're calculating have current values and some form of prediction of future or remaining values. So, this much, now we're at this much. How soon before we get to that much? It's just a matter of process. But if the future value is removed or the measurement's not possible, then the ultimate or total value is deemed incalculable. So if you know how much you've got now and you don't know how much more you can get, you can't calculate the total. So it's incalculable. Okay, now we talk about loss. Loss takes a variety of forms. It's just not our personal loss, it's loss to the bigger picture. So we'll just narrow it down and say, we're talking about loss of information. And the information is essentially counts or values. So we can have a loss of information due to the information not being captured when it was available. My sensor didn't capture that because it was offline when the data went by, so I didn't capture it. The information was never made available. Somebody collected a value and forgot to log it. The information just wasn't made available for whatever reason. Or there was information available and it was removed, which meant we couldn't evaluate it. The ever popular, there was information, but it was redacted. So you put the two together and you come up with incalculable loss. Whenever we're unable to calculate a value due to loss of information, we just declare the loss to be incalculable. So as individuals, we deal with personal loss, and that's just due to limited lifespan. We're going to have loss over time. At a larger scale, you lose due to natural disasters, be it earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, hurricanes, tornadoes. That's always going to be with us until we have the weather modification network of Star Trek. But that kind of loss is more than the individuals. It's also the loss of infrastructure, business, finance, progress, all kinds of loss associated with natural disasters. And the pain of loss, our individual suffering from a loss, it varies based upon the individual, whether it's an individual loss, a family loss, could be a national prestigious loss. We recently lost a former Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. So that was a loss for the US, but globally, not as much. But when you lose, the output of a country, that can affect the rest of the planet. Some loss is more easily preventable than others. Sometimes it's just as simple as you want to mitigate the loss, follow the rules or the guidelines. What do you start out with when you're young? Don't play with matches. Don't play with stuff that's flammable. Therefore, you're less likely to catch fire or burn yourself, and therefore you'll be around for a long time to contribute. Follow traffic rules. Don't speed, don't run stop signs, don't run traffic lights, and you'll probably live longer. And so will the other people that you might come into contact with. And the most recent one we know about is you follow the infection prevention guidelines, and you're either less susceptible to gaining an infection, or if you take the appropriate preventative measures, then you're less likely to receive a large impact based upon having attained an infection. Some losses are at the scale of a civilization. Near Earth extinction events, that could be at the scale of a civilization. Some of these things we can better mitigate because we actually take action on them. Sometimes it's a nationwide action. You have to bar imports or immigrations of people, but sometimes you can allow them in, which allows them to be preserved rather than lost. So there's a double-edged sword there. Currently, we're experiencing incalculable loss of the potential of lives lost due to two things. One is lack of simple precautions to prevent the spread of disease, the pandemic and COVID in its various forms, and then military action currently in the Ukraine, and there are other military actions going on elsewhere on the planet, in the Middle East and in Africa, that aren't so popularized in the media, but there's still loss of life. And whether you're the aggressor or the ones being attacked, there is loss of life on both sides. And therefore, the loss is actually more than just the country being attacked, it's also the country doing the attacking, because if you're conscripted, you don't really have a choice in the matter. So how do we calculate potential? You never know what someone is ultimately capable of as a contribution until they actually apply themselves. So, we can say we might want to evaluate someone to see what their potential is, but you never really know their potential until they are given the opportunity to do things with it. But if you want to nurture a person, There are several ways you can do this. Obviously, nutritionally, you can feed them properly and they'll be healthier and last longer. You can educate them to a higher degree so that everyone has the same level of educational opportunity. That allows them to start with a higher baseline and achieve more. Environmental safety. If you live in a place that's heavily polluted with toxic metals, it's not going to be very safe for the individual to have a long life or for them to mentally advance. There's physical safety. War is definitely a contributor to the lack of physical safety. And then there's the minimal ones that we don't think of quite so obviously, like financial security. If you're constantly having to worry about getting enough money to provide food on the table for you and your family, it detracts from your ability to do other things, like maybe investigating, researching, coming up with solutions to problems. So financial security I put in that same list. So only once all of these levels of nurturing are in place can an individual stretch their personal limits to achieve what otherwise might not be possible. So we can, as youngsters are going through the educational process, we can evaluate them using testing. What is their educational evaluation? Their PSAT, their SAT, the proverbial and not so great IQ tests. We can try and evaluate their potential, but if we're not nurturing them or providing them a safe environment in which they don't have to worry about food, it's kind of pointless to evaluate their potential because their potential may be reduced by other means. So it's optimal to assume that under improved conditions, the vast majority of individuals can accomplish incredible things, but you won't know. So you'll never know who the next, fill in the blank here with the name of somebody that you think of as a valuable contributor to the long-term existence of the human species, be it an Einstein or a Newton or Kepler, or just pick somebody. And it doesn't have to be specifically science. It can be in arts. It can be in mathematics. Just, you never know who that next person might be or what they might have contributed until you give them the opportunity to do so. So you nurture their ability and therefore their potential is increased. Now we roll in the incalculable loss of potential. So the level of contribution that an individual makes is dynamic. Different people contribute differently. Different people have different mental skill sets, or based upon their education, can progress above that baseline. So how much they're going to do and what they contributed, we'll never actually know until we take a retrospective analysis of their individual life, what their contributions were as opposed to what they might be. So once they're at end of life, we know what they did contribute. However, if their potential to contribute was cut short, we'll never know all that they might have contributed immediately to others around them, regionally to a nation, or globally to the improved or advancement of the human species. If the loss of one potentially promising individual is incalculable, then the loss of large numbers of people with unknown levels of promise is truly incalculable to the progress of the human species. And it doesn't matter what the source of the loss is. We know some current things, but even if it's a natural disaster and you lost thousands of people, you don't know what that loss actually is. So if you were to say, if we could have not lost so many people over the existence of the human species, where would we be today? What would we not be considering a hurdle today that we conquered? So in conclusion, and I thought this might be short, this is obviously my analysis and my opinion. If you've never thought of it in this way, it's unlikely to have been your opinion as well. Now that you're more aware, maybe you can start to consider a similar opinion. The pursuit of knowledge collectively by an entire species is the ultimate power. If you want to advance technology abilities, then the best way to do that is to give more people the ability to expand their potential, and that is the ultimate power. War is never the answer because it's going to harm the ability to advance the species. And widespread preventable loss is a burden to progress, whether it be from natural disasters, which we have little to no control over, or disease, which might be curtailable. I won't say preventable, but curtailable, or war, which is certainly preventable. So if we want to relate that back to somebody knowledgeable who once said something that does indicate our cosmic insignificance, there's two possibilities. Either we are alone in the universe or we are not. Both are equally terrifying. And that was from Arthur C. Clarke. I thought, if you're thinking about, well, we're so small in the overall scale of the universe, what difference does it make? It makes a big deal of difference to us. And if we're the most advanced thing that's out there, it makes a difference to the rest of the universe. So everybody can contribute if we allow them to contribute. Or my favorite saying, which is, you'll never know how much you didn't know until you know what you didn't know. So hopefully this discussion has at least been some food for thought. And I did come up with one link from the National Library of Medicine of the National Institutes of Health on our cosmic insignificance. So when you think about the National Institutes of Health only thinking about healthcare, as I was stating, we may be significant to the universe. So when you're thinking about us being cosmically insignificant, we want good healthcare because we may be significant to the rest of the universe.
That's excellent topic. One of the things that come to my mind very often is that when was the end of the Second World War, the United States helped a lot of people who had excellent education coming from Europe to stay in the United States. And the technology that we are using right now to communicate with ourselves is the technology that came from that era. Because of course they use their knowledge for, the war effort and stuff, but the consequence of the knowledge that we gain with those people who came from somewhere else and helped the United States and make the United States the powerhouse, the economical powerhouse that it used to be, because it had opened doors for immigrants. It had open doors for refugees. So you saw how much of the investment in that people who came from other places, who spoke different languages or had different religions, and came and helped the United States, because we used to be, the democracy, like Olympus. So they came by the ideals and they helped the effort, and you saw the economic development between the Second World War, the half of the Second World War, when we developed the technology, we brought scientists from other places, and until we have the end of the space era, when we finally arrived to the moon. So that period, you have a lot of people, the country was open. Now, for me, who experienced the immigrational system, I have a college degree, I have education, but the way they put the system organized together, it makes impossible for someone who has a college degree to actually continue to work as someone who has enough education. And you end up doing, menial jobs to survive, because the country is not open anymore. It takes for you almost 1 to 2 decades for you to, fix your immigrational status, and the cost is like unbelievable. So before it wasn't, and when the country was more open, it brought economy to the country. And now, because we become like more close as a country, it's more difficult. So you're not bringing the brains. And that is a huge loss, because some countries that have economical problems, religious problems, war problems, they have the brain drain. The brain drain used to come here. And we saw the economy of the country and the technology that was developed become something that you can hold in your hand or put in your pocket because of that. And now we are losing. That's another loss, because we are stopping people on the frontiers, for people who come and have papers and have everything organized as immigrational status, for them to actually exercise a profession that they had already, they make so difficult that it makes impossible. And the other thing is that the other loss is that not just like, oh, let's go back to school because the system is different, but $100,000 college for a science degree, it's like unbelievable. This is the price of a house, or it's incredible that you cut the access to a higher level of education, making it very expensive. And you also cut people from other countries that had already the education to exercise what they know, to teach everybody else, to use their knowledge here, because they make the immigrational transition very difficult.
Yeah, I think the way to solve that sort of problem is to come up with international guidelines for education, so that there's no longer a question of, well, you're from another country, we don't know about your educational system, so if you've got a degree, we're not sure that your degree is equivalent to our degree with the same name. And
well, over here, but Monroe,
for,
over here, someone who got education in Florida cannot work in California. It's not even like if you go in great states, your life is a nightmare too.
Yes.
So it's like this country became so closed that it stopped economically. That's a consequence of becoming very difficult to avoid immigration, even internal immigration. And this, I have difficulties, but you have to imagine that for you to figure out I'm a foreigner, you need to listen to me speaking. And what about the people who are physically, looking like a foreigner? That is even more difficult, because, it's like they cannot hide who they are. And it's very difficult, even like crossing states. If you have a different accent, people treat you differently. This country became very weird, in the few last 30 years or so. And you used to be like, everybody wants to come here because you have the Olympus of democracy, the chance, the American dream. And now if you look at the statistics, only people who already have is the one people who can still stay on the top.
Well, the dirty little secret is the H-1B visas, which is in corporate circles, it is well recognized that people in other countries can contribute to the progress of companies in the US. So we like those H-1B visas because we like going over to other countries and getting very well educated, very skilled, very knowledgeable people at a low price. So we're more than willing to do that, but only so many of them. We don't want too many in. So there's a cap on H-1B visas.
And it wasn't before.
No, there was, but the caps were higher. Yes.
Because I did want to say a couple different things here.
Sure.
One is that it's hard to talk about all these, but I have three different topics. So one is that Biden just approved 100,000 Ukrainians to come to our United States. So immigration is alive today, and that they are importing people here. Also, my parents,
They're not
my
immigrating,
parent
that
parents.
they're
but
not
I
immigrating,
okay,
Joanne.
wait.
That's not
I haven't
immigration.
finished.
That's
Ellen, wait,
refugee.
let her finish.
Okay.
Okay. Because I know you can take me off topic, and I have three that I wanted to address. And yes, you can say that that's rescue. I see it, and I know by definition what you're saying, but it's still people coming over here from another country and being accepted by the United States. But the other thing is that, like in my family, and I don't know for other people, my family was immigrated here, and that was two generations ago for me. Actually on my both sides was my grandparents came here, and I'm the first person in my family to have graduated from college, and it was not easy to get into college nor to pay for college then, and I worked very hard during it, and so sometimes I get like wondering, are we supposed to just give people stuff? I don't know. The other thing is that, and it's on the tip of my tongue, I have another point that I wanted to make, is, I'm for, educating. That's what I was thinking of, is that when Monroe was talking and he was saying that we don't know people's potential until they do something. And I know that the way that, even for me, to tell my potential, that gave me some scholarships. I didn't get large scholarships, got small scholarships, but I was very grateful, was because I was tested. And that when they test you, then they say, oh, then you can get a scholarship because you show a potential. I don't know what way to do it, type thing. I don't, they didn't feed me better because I showed a potential, but they gave me money to go to school. And that, in sense, did give me money to eat because I didn't have to pay for school then. So I just wanted to put those three things out there, and that I see some very, very positive things about the United States. And I know that there are a lot of negatives, and I'm not saying to take away from it, but I very rarely do I hear anybody say anything positive lately. So I just wanted to put out something positive. So thank you very much for my time, and I'll hear everybody come back and tell me how wrong I am, I guess. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Everybody's experience is individual, and it's shaped by the experiences they've had in life and their own progress. I know that even something as simple as, if you're in the US, which university you went to, or down to who your professor was on your core subject matter, can identify, one person as being more, having greater potential than another. I deal with this as, there's experience and then there's education. And if you have education without experience, it's valuable, but it's not as valuable as education with experience. So, it's normal for humans to evaluate things, as I said, and we always evaluate how much and how much is left or what progress we can make. So it does get down to the individual measurement process. But until we come up with a worldwide baseline for these nurturing guidances, it's sort of the inalienable rights extension of the U.S. Declaration of Independence. We need to look at that again and come away with kind of the bullet points that I came up with as to, if you're unsure as to the potential of any individual until after the fact, why not try and give every individual the same baseline? Even if it costs, it's going to be a shared cost that everyone's going to gain value from it. So we need kind of a review of the Declaration of Independence to extend it out beyond the basic three. So I'm not hearing a lot of denials, and I'm not hearing a lot of.
Okay, I got
Thank
a
you.
denial here.
Okay.
You say that war is a negative towards progress. I disagree. I think tremendous advances happen under the pressures, not by the soldiers, but the
Yeah.
people behind the scenes, all the things that are going on in materials developments and all kinds of science. I had an opportunity to take a tour of a military base at one point, and the paint was peeling off the walls, and there was steam coming out of pipes and stuff, and it was like a science fiction movie, but not now a science fiction movie, but 1950s science fiction movie. And then a war came, and I had a chance to go back there again. There was things going on. Railroad tracks had been put down, lighting, electricity, labs sprung up all over the place. People were employed. Everybody was working on something for the war effort. I think war produces progress.
I will not deny the necessity being the mother of invention. And I do believe that war creates manufacturing scale process and comes up with new technology to counter other technology, which who's to know whether we would have eventually done that or not. But yes, war does progress certain aspects of a society. And if you're looking along that same line, you can also say that if you lay waste to a country, they'll likely want to build back. And if you provide them the assistance and the funding to build back, they'll probably build back to a more advanced degree. So if you look at Germany after World War II, Japan after World War II, Vietnam after the Vietnam War, South Korea after the Korean War, all of these countries went through horrible loss. Who knows how many people's capability we lost, but at the same time, they would not have progressed unless they had that reset. So I'm not denying that war-based resets have no value. I'm just saying that if you look at it on a broader scale over a longer period of time, I think that not having the war, but having a collective focus on progress by everyone involved can maybe over a longer period of time result in the same advancement, but who's to know?
Yeah,
And
how
the
many lives is it worth to make some technological innovation?
Exactly.
Yeah,
See, that's what I
think
would ask.
we'd be
I would
better
ask,
off if we'd be better off if we had friendly rivalries, technological competitions like the space race, let's say, between countries, whether the countries are friendly or not so friendly, like between us and the Soviet Union. But that kind of competition also spurs technological improvements without killing hundreds of thousands of people.
And sometimes you can do a reset without the damage associated with the reset. One of the attitudes of SpaceX and Tesla is start from a clean slate. But the clean slate does not mean you give up on physics and math and science. It's just the processes, the manufacturing techniques. That's what you give up on. You reset and say, we're kind of in a rut at the moment. We're not really making much progress. If we reset things back and we come at it again with a new perspective, a more progressed educational perspective, what we've known over the years, learned over the years, instead of staying in the trench, can we progress things faster? And that seems to be the case if you look at Tesla and SpaceX as examples. So, the reset that war induces seems to have a positive effect. It's just all the negative effects that are a problem.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you have to think about it that from the last 30 years, there are people who are from the last 30 years in wars, and they are still refugees. So if you get a child right now from Ukraine or from, children that came from Chechnya or children that were in Aleppo, they still are living in refugee camps where they have lack of decent food, jobs, training, school, medicine, And those people had lost their chance to leave. They are in a slum or, state organized slums. And those are lives of, you could have someone who could be, a savant, or imagine that if you calculate by population and you say, okay, if you have a decent, educational system, food and job and safety, you have that many genius that contribute to science. You get a number, let's say 1 in every 100. Imagine like the millions there in camps, and you're losing those minds because instead for them to be working, they're walking around to get water and firewood and, being raped and, having to raise children that they are children. And they're living those lives. Those lives are, sometimes like those kinds of lives is better die because you have no hope for the future. And there is no advancement the war brings that can recuperate those minds and those structures and those cities that are lost. I do think,
Can I,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Joe, I don't think you were advocating for war, which I hear people talking against war, and I don't think that's what you were saying.
No.
Number two is that we, I think about it for a while, I was going to say there's people that do benefit from being in war. That's a big problem that we have, is that there are people that actually want to have war because they can benefit
They make
by
money of it.
power and by money.
Profiteer,
I'm not talking
profiteer.
about the countries that are at war themselves. I'm talking about the manufacturers, all the things that have to go into making stuff. But I don't think Joe was saying that he was for war.
No,
Nobody's
I
saying.
get
We're
it.
just doing the Guncan experiment that we are thinking of what brings more loss. And I think, when you displace people, this is like a horrible. Well, when you save one, you save the whole humanity. And then we are losing a lot of people because of stupid stuff and appeasement. We've been appeasing the Putin since, we're trying to make like we're going to be friends like China. We tried to do that with Russia and never worked, because as soon as, Boris Yeltsin got to the power, all the mafia took over the country and the country became a kleptocracy. So even their people are suffering for that long, and they have their minds being washed. And you see what happened with the country. The country has no more technology. The country was head to head with the United States. And then as soon as the kleptocracy took over, it stopped, because the richness of the country was taking and end up in the hands of very few people. And that's something else that's happening here, that because you allow money going into politics, politicians are governing for the people who give their money. They are not, governing for us. It doesn't matter which party. They're governing for the people who contribute to their campaign. And because they have access, they become very rich people too, because they can speculate with the inside knowledge they have. That it's not illegal for them to do that. But if it was me doing, I was going to go to jail. But because a politician can have inside trading, nothing happens because they know. It is like a lot of things that are anti-ethical, that are actually moral. And those actions, so those people, we are losing our edge as a country, because we are allowing people who like to make money, who are, defending their shareholders, and they elect politicians to do the service for them. And whatever was illegal now became legal because they changed the law. And we are losing a lot of potential because instead to help the population to have more education, to have more safety, to have more opportunities, we are closing, we are crushing the people. And it's like you look like it's a fake democracy. It's not a real democracy. It's like it is just a republic, and the senators are controlling the country, and laws like if you go and make a poll for a change for a law to make lives better for each one of us, those laws never pass. Now, if some law that is for who they really represent, like industrialists or people who work with speculation, the law passes, it doesn't matter which party it is. So we're having another kind of war that is a silent war that's not quite visible, and we are losing a lot of potential because there are areas of the country that is no investment in schools, that is not people who born in a specific way. If you look at the statistics for the chance for the person to have a good salary, get a house, if you look at the statistics, those statistics make impossible. If you're born poor, most likely you will die poor in this country because there is no more chance for you to climb in the social ladder because of the way the politics changed for the last 30 years.
I think that we have a boundary of sovereignty and governance. Whenever we see a nation where people are being harmed, we can't put a stop to it because that's their nation. They have to govern themselves. They have sovereignty, even if another country is coming in and oppressing them. And the issue is that if you go in there, then you're the bad guy. But if you can get them to join your community and then they get attacked, now the rest of the community can come in and defend you. But if you want to stand alone, if you want to have your own independent governance, then you are just that. You are independent. And if somebody from the outside attacks you, nobody's going to come to your rescue. And that's what's happening in the Ukraine right now is they're not part of the EU. They're not part of NATO. They're their own government. They've separated away from Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. And this is what happens. If they want to be a part of the community that defends each other, you've got to join the group that you want to be with. And
they could not join. They were not allowed because remember, for the people who were in power there were propped by the Russian government. And they saw the example of Chechnya. They destroyed the whole country.
The current government had no such constraint. The prior government
but it's
did.
not easy because, he had if I go to NATO,
right.
then you have a risk to have a crazy person throw an atomic on them. That's a lot of pressure. It's not that they
and how is that mitigated?
They would want it.
And how is that mitigated by standing alone? Because last I heard, Putin's nuclear forces are on standby.
Yeah, that's right.
Didn't solve the problem. Now, if you want
situation, what does the rest of the world? What's a good attitude the rest of the world should take, given what you said, that we're not going to help an individual country that stands alone.
Yeah. Take a look at what Switzerland and Sweden are doing. They're learning from this. They're saying maybe being a part of NATO or the EU is not so bad after all because you're basically hanging with the big kids. And if a bully
comes in handy someday, yes.
If a bully does appear, you're not standing alone.
Yeah, but there is also the example of Finland. Finland is kind of not totally part of Europe, but it's part of the economical union, and it's like mostly European country. But because the easternmost of Finland is basic frontier with Russia, they cannot be on the OTAN. No, how you say it? OTAN in English. The OTAN is. The Atlantic
I mean, NATO?
NATO.
Yes,
Jesus,
North Atlantic Treaty
so NATO.
Organization.
Yeah, so if you go, if they are not joining NATO because they're afraid to be atomic bombed, and
And
Sweden is
I think
basic.
that's not, I think that's not a current reason not to join NATO. I think it may have
Take a
been
look.
after World War II when the Soviet Union had the bomb, but I think currently, it's right now everything focuses on what is going to become of Putin if he loses face.
Can
Well,
I
if
say
he
something?
loses
This
space,
is
I
Joanne.
guess everybody is going to join NATO.
Yeah, Joanne?
My understanding is that there are criteria for you to, even if you want to join NATO, you have to meet certain criteria. And one of
Yes.
Ukraine's biggest problems was that it was having a civil war for the last 8 years with the people that were living in the country that are attacking each
Donetsk.
other anyway. And that's a sad thing, but they didn't in it. I agree that we can't just, if you're not a part of it, you can't just become, once they put up a war sign, type thing. I don't know. It drives me nuts. I tell you, there's one side of me that's beating up on the other side, say, yay, nay, on what we should go in or not go in. I just hate this. I hate it. I hate it.
Well, there's two things that have always changed the fate of nations throughout history. One is a superior nation comes along with a better agenda, or a nation comes along with a superior military. And what we've been doing for the last, I'd say 50 years or more, is not doing that. Sure, the US has mischievously, through the CIA, dabbled in Central and South America, much to the detriment of those countries that they've done it in. But to create an avoidance of doing that ever again, we've basically removed the ability of the US to step in and say, you kids stop fighting, which is what a parent would do. If you've got two children that are fighting with one another, the parent, as the more powerful aspect of the interaction, says, stop, you two stop it. Well, we don't have that anymore.
So what do we do?
That's a good
Well,
question.
one of my ideas would be like, a simple one things that we've been doing appeasement for a lot of things because our government is controlled by industry, is controlled by finance, because they want to make a buck. They will force the government to deal with the dictatorial regimes, to normalize them, to say that it's okay. So we end up in a situation that we depend a lot of our economy by the Chinese, and the Chinese is not a democratic country, and they control us by the economical means because we destroy our own industry and allow them to do so. We depend on them and we allow that because the thing is that the industrialists that put the politicians in the power were the one who changed the politics. It wasn't like in the beginning, oh, let's make peace with China, let's exchange economical, maybe they will change politically and something better and better. It never happened. It's the opposite. They stole the intellectual property, and now they're, because the level of economical growth in any country historically always works like this. First, copy. Second, copy with innovation, and then innovation. They are on the phase of innovation, stealing and copying intellectual property of all over the world. And instead for us to say, no, we don't do that. No, we like the slave jobs that they have there, because the products that you have in your pocket become very, very cheap. And I am guilty of that. I bought, cheap stuff because I make not much money. And even when I did, I actually, bought stuff because it was cheaper. So the comfort that we have to buy cheap stuff that used to be very expensive and used to last a longer time. Now we are buying cheap stuff that doesn't last enough, and we depend on dictatorial regimes for oil. We depend on dictatorial regimes for materials like pure materials, and we depend on dictatorial regimes for products like ready products. So it's like we're doing something that's not quite strategical. We should have a minimal industry here. We should have a minimal protection, like we should produce most of the medicine here in the United States, and we don't. The material that we buy from China. So it's like we are opening ourselves to be dependent. We depend the oil of almost all the countries that export oils are dictatorial regimes. That says something, and we are depending on them. And that's a strategical mistake.
I think the thing that Putin has not taken into consideration is his relationship with China
And India.
in social customs. If Putin loses face in the war with the Ukraine, China will turn their back on Russia. That's the only thing that we have to look forward to at the moment. Is if it looks like Putin's not going to win in the Ukraine and China comes to that conclusion, they will no longer prop up Russia in any way. They won't go in for sanctions, but they're not going to help him. He's on his own. And
yeah, but the problem is that's not going to happen.
Why not?
Because you look at the past, and see the modus operandi of this butcher. Look at Tbilisi and look at Aleppo. When he is about to lose, he destroys everything.
Well, he's already
He
gone.
doesn't care about population.
He's already gone in and carpet bombed a couple of cities in the Ukraine.
Yeah,
because
and
he couldn't
he's like,
take over
oh,
the
let's
cities.
do corridor. When they said that we're going to be, refugee corridors for them to escape, it's like he's gonna do like he did in Tbilisi, because he was shooting and killing people in those corridors. He's a liar, and we cannot trust in him. And he will not say lose face. He will flatten the country. And I'm not even sure if he's not going to risk to put atomic somewhere.
So what you're saying is maybe we need a stronger CIA that can offer Putin a polonium-laced lunch or a lead salad.
Yeah, but remember that legally, we're not allowed to do that.
And that's why I was saying, the thing that's holding us back from taking action is our unflinching regard for sovereignty and independent governance.
Yeah,
so
but
we're not going to mess with the leadership of Russia because we don't want them messing with our leadership.
Yeah, but that's a oligarch that's offering $1 million for someone who gives a polonium cookie for him.
Yeah, and more likely that oligarch already has a $2 million claim on him.
Yeah, he's probably a dead man walking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a very difficult situation, but that's
No, it's not.
new.
It's not
That's
difficult.
not new.
It's stupidity. The whole world is stupid. That's my attitude.
And then when you look at the UN, you feel like, shooting your foot, because how can we allow the dictatorial regimes in the Security Council. That's like, it's beyond me, because everything that's happening in the world for the last 40 years or so, because we have two dictatorial regimes in the Security Council, nothing changed. Lots of
I
life.
don't think it's so much their presence in the UN Security Council as their ability to veto, their single vote veto. If they didn't have single vote veto, then you could actually, the world could
Do
actually hold them
something.
accountable. But it's much like, we don't want to mess with you because we don't want you messing with us. The US is on the Security Council, and the US has vetoed things that the Security Council wanted to have happen against Israel.
Yeah, and
So-
then I found funny about Israel is that not helping to defend Ukraine and voting stuff on the side of Russia, when most of the population of Ukraine is Jewish or
Yep.
descendants of Jewish. That for me was really egregious. That for them to not vote, to abstain from vote, or even to vote together with Russia in some things, because Ukraine is mostly Jewish. How can you, and you allow that? You're not putting
Wait a minute. Most of the people who were killed by the Nazis in Ukraine were Jewish. That's different than most of the people in Ukraine are Jewish. Where did you hear that most of the people
No,
in
it's just like
Ukraine
a
are
lot of
Jewish?
people. Yes.
No, where
Not
did
most,
you
but
hear
some
that?
cities.
As
Like
I
Odessa?
am Jewish, and I've never heard that. And in fact, one thing about Ukraine that's well known to Jewish people is that before there was a Hitler, there was a Hitler, and the Hitler was the leader of the Ukraine who went through the Ukraine and killed every Jew who was that they could find. 300,000 Jews were massacred. I think your information about Ukraine being largely Jewish is just wrong. Where did you hear that?
Okay. No, it's just because, I've seen like Odessa is quite Jewish. They have a lot of tradition. A lot of people live there. Like the literal cities, they have a lot of Jewish population. Even the president is Jewish. So it's like that they still have a lot of a big population.
Right. So everything you've said is an anecdote. So
Yes, okay. I don't know the numbers.
I'll agree. The anecdotes
Yes,
are quite
you're
clear.
right. You're right. I
Are
don't
quite
know the
clearly
numbers.
correct. Zelensky is Jewish. Odessa was a huge port of departure for people, for Jews coming to America, and those are all true. But most of the people in the
It's
Ukraine
not
are.
anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, Hitler took care of that.
Okay. Yeah, I really don't know the names, and what my knowledge is it's totally
So there's-
anecdotal and YouTube knowledge.
So there's a homework assignment to evaluate the religious
The
population
population.
percentages of the Ukraine. We'll leave it at that.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it's like there are few people there that still are and it's like for Israel not to be on the side of them in the beginning. Now I think they're switching because of stuff starting. But the whole deal is not that you agree or disagree what they are doing. The whole deal is because you're dependent of the oil.
Yes.
Germany took forever to decide to change sides. Israel, like all the countries who dependent of oil, they do the appeasement. When you have troops there, they continue with the appeasement. They started doing that after the war broke. So it's like, and then
Well,
the loss of people, the loss of opportunity, those peoples, you have to imagine those people are, some millions of people are displaced. And those people will never be able to go back to their cities because their cities are flattened. Those people will live in difficult situations in foreign countries forever. They will never have a chance to get the opportunity they would have before.
I think the reason why some countries are changing their vote now is the US has gone in and said, well, we can't supply you the oil, but we can certainly supply you natural gas. So we've come in with natural gas subsidies to supplant what Russia might have been providing them. It's just it'll come by a ship instead of pipeline.
Mm.
Okay, enough of that light topic. So any suggestions for next week's topic? Otherwise, it'll just be whatever crosses my mind during the week.
Maybe we could talk about what nature these exoplanets have. We have now 5,000 and counting. There are different ways how they are. They would be interesting to
Yeah,
talk.
I was looking at a video on YouTube earlier this morning. Much as we came up with this approach of the Goldilocks zone, and it varies based upon the star's temperature and other sorts of things like, well, if it's a super Earth, the gravity will be such that you'll never be able to create a chemical-based rocket that will lift you off the surface of it. So even if you had intelligent life there, if your gravity is 3 or 4 times what it is here on Earth, you probably would have to develop some advanced technology before you could ever leave your planet or put satellites in orbit. So they're starting to open up the formula well beyond our definition. If you remember the Kepler probe, when the Kepler probe first went out there, it was only looking for yellow, G2 class stars.
Right.
And then in the Kepler second mission, it was, let's open that up to orange and maybe some red stars, but just go yellow and orange. And they found, thousands more exoplanets. So we're now starting to look at what other things might affect whether or not life can develop on that exoplanet. And one of the things they're taking into account is hydrogen atmosphere planets that have deep oceans. So the ocean is under extreme pressure. So you have a Jupiter kind of world or a very large super Earth that the atmosphere is predominantly hydrogen, but instead of having a solid surface for the planet, it has an ocean. And the pressure of the hydrogen at that large a planet keeps the water intact as opposed to it boiling off or evaporating or freezing. But at that level, you're starting to talk about extremophiles being the only kinds of life that could live there, but it's still life. So they're starting to poke along the edges of what life means. And once they get a broader picture of that, I think they'll start to think about what intelligent life means, because we're not even doing that very well here on Earth. I don't know what's smart. We're smart because we can say we're smart. What about apes and chimpanzees? Oh, they can't speak English very well, so they're not as smart as us. Well, what about birds, certain birds? Well, they don't speak, they can pantomime or repeat English, but they don't know what they're saying, so they're not smart. Really? Have you watched them? Behaviors of animals, what constitutes social behaviors? We're starting to loosen up that grip on, well, if it doesn't say, don't eat me, then it's fair game for humans to eat. So it may be that we poke around the edges and find that eventually a lot of those exoplanets that we say have no life, maybe do have life. It's
They
just
do have life.
life in
I,
a
I
different
I have a
environment.
suggestion. I have a suggestion for a topic.
Sure,
I don't know. I didn't mean to interrupt you though. If you're
go ahead.
okay, I did interrupt you though. Anyhow, the topic that I was thinking of is that we don't actually see the night sky because we don't have the telescope at this time. But it would be interesting to hear, like maybe once a month or something, like what would be interesting to see in the sky. What should be, I know
Okay,
that there's places to go and look at that, and I know there's things that I could do myself. But
yeah, I've deliberately avoided that because there are so many other places that you can find that information.
Okay.
A good one that's not too long is if you go to YouTube and you look up Dr. Becky. Dr. Becky Smethurst, she's a planetary scientist over in the UK. And she has a weekly and a monthly YouTube broadcast where she brings you up to date on news and what's up in the night sky. So I would recommend, if you're looking for that kind of information, tap into her information flow. She has, I guess you could say, 3 different classes of videos. One is special topics that just come up whenever. She has weekly and she has monthly broadcasts. So take a look at those. I think she does a pretty good job of it.
Going back to the homework, I just look in the CIA world fact.
Yes.
Muslim and Jewish make about 1 to 2% of the Ukraine population. Mostly it's Christian Orthodoxy.
Yes. Well, you might also say that that was
My investigation shows 0.4% Jewish.
Adam. What's your source of information?
Survey that they listed on Wikipedia. Let me see what the survey is. Religion in Ukraine.
Yeah,
Blah, blah, blah.
because it's a matter of national defense, I would more go with the CIA Book of Facts.
Yeah, the CIA Book of Facts put Muslims and Jewish in one number, and is 1 to
okay, if it's
2%.
1 to
So it's
2%
not
in
that,
one
that
number,
precise.
That's the same as 0.5%. Also, there are less Jews there now than there were several years ago as well. But in any case, right. So very few.
Okay. And you might think that the Christian Orthodoxy comes by way of originally being part of Russia.
No, I think it's like from, the Greek teachings going that way.
No, it's
The Greeks
actually the Greek Orthodoxy. Actually, Russian Orthodoxy came from Ukrainian Orthodoxy. Ukraine was a country before Russia was.
Yeah.
The Kievan Rus, which means the Kievan Vikings of all things, was the first state in the area that was a unified state, and they became the Vikings that ruled Moscow when Kiev declined. So really, it isn't that Ukraine was part of Russian culture, but Russia derived from Ukrainian culture.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole deal start in Europe and move that way. So the city of Kiev is one of the oldest cities in Europe. And I learned how to pronounce.
That's okay. Up until this war, all my life it was Kiev.
Yeah, for me too. That was always Kiev.
Yeah. Then again, it was also Istanbul as opposed to Istanbul.
Not Constantinople.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Kiev. It's Kiev because everybody said the name Kiev in Russian. The name of Kiev in Russian is Kiev. It's Kiev in Ukrainian. Anyway, I should mention, Helen, I did agree with everything else you said tonight. Only the number of Jews in Ukraine I didn't agree with.
No, I stand corrected. I like to be correct.
Yeah, that's okay. I just wanted to say that on all the other stuff about the wars and the oil and stuff, I agree with you.
No, but the thing is, like, I look at, some cities are more concentrated. Unfortunately, those areas are being depopulated. So now it's even less. Because those are in the literal.
That's the one thing I'd like to consider these sessions to be, is open to investigating the sources of information. And if we find out there's a change, we need to adjust our perspectives. I think we should be free to do that without any repercussions. So
you're right. I was using an anecdotal source, just looking at whatever was showing on TV to make drama. And
well,
maybe,
given all the stuff that's out there on the internet and in videos and biased sources of information, it is difficult to come away with facts that are facts. And consider sources and the biases of sources. And, you know, you may find that, oh,
But- Yeah, but by the way, if you want to go, like for me, whenever I travel internationally or when I do something in another country, even now online, before I do, I go on a COA World Book of Facts, those numbers and those, even like when I want to talk some with someone from Brazil, where I born, the best news is on the CIA World Book of Facts. It's updated
Yeah.
all the time by and it's excellent because it has social, economical, demographic. It is really good. You should just read about United States on the CIA Book of Facts. It's like a learning session.
And it doesn't have to be a formal country. These can be, you know, fledgling island groups in the Pacific Ocean that aren't even a formal nation, and you can find entries in there for that. I think it's just an amazing repository of information that's freely accessible. It used to be only available to CIA operational analysts. It was
No,
their
I had
means-
access when I worked in the Brazilian government.
No, I'm saying when they first created it. When the CIA first developed the World Book of Facts, it wasn't something that was publicly accessible. It was
Right.
the analytical side of the CIA providing information to the operational or mission side of the CIA. And it just became too valuable a resource. And with the internet, the government just decided, let's make this public because there's no harm in making it public. Why not? Well, I found there was a problem with it when we went to war in the Middle East. Because one of the things you'll find in there is the size of the standing armies of countries, what their militaries are like, how much money is invested in their militaries. And as soon as we went to war in Iraq, that information disappeared. But that was our means of knowing how big a standing army they had and whether we wiped it out or not. And without that information, how are you going to calculate it? So
Updating the information.
so I think that it's not a perfectly unbiased source of information. Much like
is it?
anything nowadays, you have to take everything with a small amount of sodium chloride. Okay.
All right.
Well,
Wow,
see,
we're
if
really
I
gonna
have any
finish early
ideas
tonight.
for discussion. Are you making note of the ideas?
Am I? Of course I am. I've got a little green ink pencil down here that I scratch
Okay.
things like exoplanet life.
Okay. Because sometimes I come up with ideas and then I forget to tell, later. And then
Well,
I
if you
can't
did-
remember.
If you mention them during these sessions and it's not something already in my mind.
No,
read
I
it.
mentioned like 2 or 3 things on our way from Cyprus, Big Cyprus,
Yeah.
but then I forgot, and probably you forgot too.
Well, since I was driving at the time, I couldn't take notes.
Yeah, but we had a conversation about talking about Ukraine scientists, something like that. But this discussion was even more open.
That's what this
Yeah.
discussion was, is it was rooted from what you suggested. I increased it to more be along the lines of what Sagan and Tyson, that Neil deGrasse Tyson mentioned in Cosmos, is the potential of human beings and how we don't know how much we've lost given all the decimation we've caused ourselves.
And in here, it's not war, it's mostly racism and redlining that's causing the same kind of loss.
Anytime you don't have that set of 5 precepts of nurturing people, you're going to have some diminishment of an unknown capability. So
That's true.
Yeah, so I was looking, reading a survey, which again, I don't remember what survey it was, just the other day, where they studied the IQ of different people in the United States. And they studied it for many years, from when they were in elementary school till they graduated high school and they were in college. And they found out that it wasn't, that some people with really high IQ did really well, and other people with really high IQ really underperformed. And I bet you can guess what the other factor is that determined that, right?
Income.
It's opportunity.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
how much money they had. Exactly. Yeah. Wealthy people, upper middle class people with high IQ are doing fine, and others aren't. And I think what you're saying, I don't even understand the question of what you're saying. It's so obvious, Monroe. If somebody has the intelligent and their kids are smart, but they need to be working 2 jobs and they can't spend any time with their kids and read with them, or maybe they grew up and their parents didn't read to them. If they don't have the money to live somewhere close to a good school, if they can't drive their kid to a good school, I take my daughters one daughter who's still in school here to school every day, and my ex picks her up every day and so forth. That if you're unable to do that, first of all, even the schools in Miami-Dade, they do pretty well with the schools. They have lots of magnet schools in lots of different areas. My daughter goes to one that's in design and architecture and stuff like that. But people who don't have the money to live near the school or to drive to the school, I mean, there are kids, my daughter tells me there are kids who take a bus and they have to get up 2 hours earlier just to get the bus to get to school. And so I think that that's a real limitation on the potential.
Yes.
Yes, when I was going to public school, I was fortunate enough that the schools that I went to, I was literally within walking distance of them or bicycling distance. And when it got to be farther was when I was up in my teens, and I put down the money from working odd jobs and was able to have a car. But the car had expenses like insurance and gasoline and stuff. So sometimes I walked to school quite a distance, even though I had a car, because the car was an expense. So I definitely understand how you can want to be educated, you can want to do better, but if you don't have the right environment, and as it's like the 5 factors I mentioned, if you don't have the right environment, it's really a challenge to progress. There was an astrophysicist and a mathematician that was born in India who came up as somebody who really wanted to be more educated than he was allowed to be. And he went to the UK and he went to a university and worked kind of as an associate to the educational staff. And they found out how capable the individual was mathematically, but he had no degree, no college degree. But Helen, do you remember his name?
Subramanian Chandrasekhar?
Yes, it was. And that's where we have the Chandrasekhar limit on star size and black hole size. So the potential of an individual is only there when you nurture it and you realize, oh, wow, this person actually can contribute significantly. But you have to nurture it.
And
I,
okay,
I,
go.
I know, I agree with you totally. And yet I have I don't usually share this, but so I don't even know if I want to share it, but I will, because I think it is important to realize too, that sometimes those things that make it difficult in life make people develop things that we wouldn't have otherwise, type thing. My father grew up in an orphanage. I think that was very depressing, and he did it during a depression period of time. My mom, she had very similar problems, that her mom went overseas to help. She worked on a cruise ship, my grandmother, which sounds really great and wonderful, but she was working on this ship, and she went down to Brazil 17 times. Wonderful country, my grandmother would say. And she enjoyed her work, but she did not like being separated from my mom, in which my mom had to live with her grandmother. And it was very, they had a very hard time. And when they became parents, and neither one of them graduated from high school, you know, I mean, well, they both went back, and my mom graduated later, and so did my dad from high school. And they didn't, my dad joined the service when he was 16 years old, which you're not supposed to, but he did anyway. And I'm just saying that adversity, my parents did a wonderful life. They had many wonderful things later on, and they continuously change, because our world doesn't allow you always to stay in the same job. And sometimes people are like mad because they have to change their job instead of changing what they do. And I know that that's not easy to do, and that everybody has the ability, and maybe it should be easier. It should have been easier for my parents. Yes, I agree. But I don't know if my parents would have done as well as they did if it had been easier. I don't know.
Much as war creates advancement, the struggle also creates a desire to do better. I know from my own personal experience, my father was raised in an orphanage. He did go to war 2 years before he should have legally been allowed to. My mother grew up poor in Gadsden, Alabama. They both struggled to get a high school diploma. Neither one of them went to college, but when it came time for myself and my sister to go to college, there was no ifs, ands, or buts. We're going to go to college. Well, we're going to pay for it, not my parents, but we want you to go to college because it will make things better for you in the long run. And I chose to, work to get the money to go to college, public universities, local schools. My sister, on the other hand, wasn't as good a student and thought it was a waste of her time, so she only went for a couple of semesters and never graduated. But I think the benefit of the struggle is incremental, much like war creates technology, and it may appear advanced, but I think it's incremental. I think if you have the general population being at a higher plateau through nurturing, that you're going to have far more people contributing far greater.
Yeah, that's the whole deal. It's like you don't look at the individual struggle that brings idea and stuff. What you look
But
at,
I don't know about Animal House. Doesn't seem like much of a struggle. You talk about people,
That was not a public university. That was a private university.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we need to look is not like, oh, one individual, another individual, because those are exceptional stories. What you need to look is the demographical factor in those, for you to put, walls for people to progress. Instead to place walls, you need to put steps for people to progress. So if you, instead to look one person, another person who had money, who had education, have different kinds of parents, this is like just, pin drops of ideas and of opportunities that happen. Now, when you look demographically, you're losing economical resource in those brains. You need to look at them because then you know the total of the population. What would be the chance? What would be, so it's like, public, like some of people have ideas that they want to stop all public education, and that's an absurd. You cannot vote for someone who has those kinds of ideas. And the same thing is like it continued, because when you guys were in college, you have money from the state, well, you have money from residents, you have other kinds of opportunity to go. Today, for people to get those kinds of money to get to go to school, first of all, just, the exceptional students, like all A+ students, they're gonna get those chances. And the other thing is that you're gonna go for your whole adult life paying college debt, because college now is inaccessible. It's like-
Even public colleges are so exorbitantly expensive, you're going to amass debt for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple points if I could.
Sure.
One is what I admired about Ramanujan, who was an Indian mathematician that went and worked with Hardy over in the UK, was he had a different approach to solving mathematics problems, and that he'd work them backwards. And at that time, that was not the way you did things. That's one point. The second point is in reference to previous conversation, I've been sort of holding back. The Soviet Union lost over 2 million people in about 1985 when they became Russia. And a lot of these people that got out of the Soviet Union were highly intelligent and skilled in professions. And of course, that's now happening again. Now we estimate that maybe Russia could end up losing as much as 1 million people that have highly educated, highly skilled, that will want to get out due to the sanctions and the lifestyle and so on.
Be
So
obliged to serve in the army.
yes, yes, exactly. The conscription program that they have for kids are 17, their educational system is quite different. And that once you came out of high school and you went to college, and you had a 6-year apprenticeship program before you went into your field. Well, that was great if you had families of 7 kids and come from a rural background. But now when you have families of maybe 2 kids, there's a real lag in that 6-year apprenticeship program. And so they are not getting as skilled people going into the professions as quickly as they did before. So they've got some educational problems over there. And I think our educational program, when you take the vocational classes out of local high schools, and I understand that they want to save money on let's say you have a wood shop, for example, and you specialized in a machine shop or auto mechanics or whatever, like they do at was it Dillard High School or whatever. Then you spend a lot of money busing kids around. I mean, I see the kids going out in front of my house around 5 o'clock in the morning to get to school. So they are in school doing their programs, but they can't stay longer locally. They got to catch that bus to get home. And so by taking the vocational programs out of school and then forcing kids to pay for them and vocational classes, that drives them into debt also.
Yes.
I think that the vocational classes that are commercial are merely a matter of taking public money and redirecting it into private corporations. You get the
Exactly.
Kaisers and
Exactly.
the Phoenix and all those sorts of
Right.
companies will educate you because the schools can no longer educate you. And the reason for that is you took the programs out of the schools where they were public, that all students at all high schools could do it, and you concentrated it through this private commercial channel.
That's right. And
One
so
of the things that you mentioned that people don't understand, that the tax that you cease to pay for a service of the state is going to be the fee that you're going to pay in double for the private investment.
Because the private company has to make a profit.
If you have kids that were in a high school and had an opportunity to take a wood shop class, they may want to become a skilled carpenter, but never having that opportunity.
Mhm.
Parents that maybe didn't have a workshop or whatever.
Yep.
They don't even know what is it.
Yeah.
Well,
they
the high
don't
school,
have-
the high school I went to had a machine shop, which typically graduated auto mechanics, and they had a wood shop,
Right.
which typically graduated people working in carpentry. I
Right.
was lucky enough they had a third kind of shop, which was the computer lab. So that's what I came out of.
Yeah. And they had drafting, they had robotics, they had
Yeah.
all kinds of things. At my high school, which was Deerfield Beach High School, they went from two nurses doing medical programs, 7 business teachers down to 2 in the business program. They had 4 home economics teachers, and they went down to 1 culinary arts teacher. I mean, it's been a big decline. They took out all the wood shop, all the drafting, all of that, and they
Because
put in.
the presumption is you can get all of those educational skills if you just pay money to a business.
That's right,
Yeah.
and the apprenticeship programs and co-op programs have gone out the door.
Mhm.
You haven't seen those much.
Well, they
But
used to be more
Oh,
subtle
yeah.
because I went through that when I got my baccalaureate degree in computer systems, and I went to work for a company, and they certainly would not trust you with much of anything for about the first 3 years, and they give you a little
Right.
trust in the 3 to 5 years, but it was basically a 5-year apprenticeship without calling it that.
Uh-huh. Right. Yep. Well, we're going to probably end up with a lot of very highly skilled people coming out of the Ukraine and maybe Russia
Yeah.
as a result of this recent conflict, you should say.
Yeah. Well, hoping for the best probabilities.
Yeah, I'm seeing, I've seen a lot of loss to public schools also, as
Yeah.
well as a card because of charter schools.
Yes.
And true magnet schools. They took a lot of talented kids out of communities. And the thing about charter schools is they're happy to take your kid, but if your kid misbehaves, back you go to the public school. However, the charter school has kept all the state money for the education of that.
Right. The public school is required to take every child, and the charter schools can say, oh, this one isn't learning so well, or it has a behavior issue, just get rid of them. I think they don't even have to pass the same tests as the state schools, right?
Well, the DeSantis recently, they passed a law that every subject was going to have a test, a completion test, and then they decided, oh, that's a lot. So they went down to test on algebra, test on reading. They kicked in a test on biology and history, but they only said that the algebra and the reading were required for graduation. And then, of course, and that testing took well over a month of disruption to regular classes. So that was a loss of learning right there, because certain subjects like mathematics and music and foreign languages are sequential. And when you break them up with, okay, 3 days of testing this week, you have 2 days of classes, you have loss. And so recently they've decided that the testing is no good and it's too expensive. And so they are discontinuing that. Well, teachers have always done testing, and good ones did pre-tests and post-tests to find out where their kids were and what they needed to do to help them progress. But teachers lost control over the curriculum with the state and with principals who, a lot of the principals that I know in recent years wanted to become principals for the money. And while they were interested in kids, they were, that's how you got a raise if you were a teacher. You went in administration. and you didn't make any money going into guidance. You
Well,
know,
that's not just in teaching. I went through the same thing in technology. You can only get to a certain level of salary and leadership and stay technical. You had to become administrative or managerial in order to make more money.
that's right. And there's a loss right there, because if you had somebody that was maybe a lower level, even making, and you gave them the same amount of money so they could stay in that level, you probably could get more teamwork and progress, you know.
Mhm.
So I hated seeing that, but that's all right. When I retired after 46 years, you know, my principal didn't even say, so long, goodbye, good riddance, nothing,
Yeah.
not a word. So it's like, there's no gold watches anymore.
Yeah. Oh, no. So I see he joined late, but he hasn't been on these sessions for a while. Hi, Jay.
Hey, how you doing?
I bet you thought we would be talking about astronomy or space.
I meant
No,
to dial in.
tonight was a different topic. We've had a variety of other topics that were that. So we focused on something different tonight, which was, given all the things that are happening in the world, the loss of capability, the loss of resource, given between the pandemic and what's happening in the Ukraine, just focusing on the loss of human potential. So.
Got it.
Do you think that like the bubonic plague in the Dark Ages led to the Renaissance, where you had so many people that died and they left money to the survivors, and those survivors want better things in their life? Do you think that's going to be a follow-up to the current pandemic?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's widespread enough. I think the Spanish flu at the beginning of the previous century, I think that was a greater impetus to it. I think that does kind of happen, because if you look at it, constellations have Greco-Roman names, but stars have Arabic names. How did we get that? Because while we were busy messing with other things, they were off recording stars in their names for a different purpose than we'd wanted. But the communication of information that one country gains, the knowledge they gain, communicating that to other countries is how you spread around what you've gained. And yes, I think that there are intelligent people in the Ukraine. There are people that are into technology. A lot of it is, space, oil, natural gas. There's a lot of it there that I think that as they leave that country, if they can find a stable home, they're going to add value to those other countries. That is a loss for the Ukraine and probably a loss for Russia as well.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. I use it as analogous to, at whatever point in time we realize there's intelligent life beyond our planet, we're going to have to go through this all over again as them versus us, them knowing, us knowing, them not knowing, us not knowing, them having more, us having less. All those things that have separated us here on this planet, we're probably dumb human enough to want to recycle it all over again.
Yeah. One of the new terms that has come up recently, of course, we have misinformation, disinformation, or some people say fake news, but is another term called malinformation. And that's amazing that the rise of the internet have led to so many different types of ways of saying things.
Yeah,
Well,
and malinformation is so insidious because it's something that is made up all made up to look like it's real. It's so the intention in that malinformation is actually to mislead people because it's packaged on in a way that looks like good source of information. So this is really insidious.
But how does that differ from disinformation?
Well, disinformation sounds more like, it's not really made up to look, that's just only people who actually believe it. It's like,
Well, disinformation, to my understanding, has more to do with like propaganda.
yes,
It is-
exactly. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So
Where,
Well,
almost like it looks like it's information, it's packaged in a way that's news or that's serious. So it's like I've been reading a lot of nutritional stuff. So when you have, let's think about the industry of eggs. Eggs makes, invite people to research about eggs and publish papers, and then they publish all the science in favor that eating eggs is good for you and there's no risk. And so this is malinformation because they play around with the numbers or the factors of the statisticals of the study. And plus, when you look at the name of the scientists, they all work for the animal industry. So this is malinformation. So this is like
kind of like the Sugar Corporation putting money out there to make sure it was sugar that was good for you and fat that was bad for you.
Yeah, so it's like they play around with the numbers. That's why it's really good when you look, like when you read a paper, to look if that is peer reviewed, and also look for where these people work, if they have compromises with the data, and look at the statistical references and the numbers, and look how they treated the data to be sure if it's serious. And you need to wait for, because no scientific paper can change science before it's peer reviewed. And after it's peer reviewed, and then also that's very important, is the meta-analysis. The meta-analysis, like getting all the studies that are close together and study the numbers and see the aggregation of the data through the decades. That's like the real science when it establishes itself. So when you have studies being published by industry, you have to put, your grain of salt, like you pay attention, with the data and see the meta-analysis. So this is what means like malinformation. It's something that is packaged to look A-okay, but it is not. It's manipulated.
But
yeah,
even,
with
even when you have information that has gone through the 5 Sigma process of review, if it comes away with an answer that some people don't want to hear, it'll still be denied as there's insufficient information, there's insufficient observation. Like a video that Helen sent me recently by way of her Facebook page, where, no, that's not possible, therefore your information must be wrong. Well, here's the analysis, here's the multiple teams that came away with the same observational conclusion. What's wrong with it? Well, you just haven't done enough observations, because we don't want that to be the answer.
And I posted that, but I haven't made my head yet. I haven't made up my mind yet.
Yeah.
What do you think about the info? Oh, I thought you were done.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go on.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say, what do you think of the information that my doctor just gave me? Said that they did another study on coffee. And this time they had thousands and thousands of people in the study. And now he wants me to go. He says I'm doing really good because now I'm drinking 1 cup to 2 cups. I have to force myself to drink coffee. I haven't found a coffee that I like yet. And the coffee, he says that now I need to drink 4 cups of coffee a day. And if I did 5, that would be great. And he says it can be caffeinated or not caffeinated, depending on it. It doesn't affect the liver. He's only looking at the liver. If you want to go to talk to a different doctor about something else, but I need to clean out my liver because I'm not having trouble with nerves or other problems that coffee can cause. So he wants me to do this so I can clean out my liver, and it's
Joanne.
working so far.
Okay,
But anyway,
Joanne,
okay,
if you want
yeah.
to really educate yourself about it, go on nutritionalfacts.org. There,
Yeah.
they do meta-analysis, and the person who is responsible for the page doesn't have payment at all.
Well,
So it's
I don't
totally-
know. Yeah, and I knew that was what you would bring up, or I thought Monroe would bring up. Is, well, who did you get this? Who did you get the study from? I didn't ask for the study, so I will go back and ask him for the study, and find
Well,
out who it is.
And
from.
remember, the study needs to be peer reviewed. Just one study
It was
cannot
peer.
take
It
sides.
was peer reviewed, and it is out there.
And
At
then you
least the
need
one
to
for the
look at
2 cups of
bibliography
coffee.
too.
Two
Yeah.
2 cups of coffee was. I know there's a lot of information because I read a lot up on it about the on 2 cups of coffee. So
Yeah, but take a look on nutritional fact. Take a look on nutritionalfacts.org. Let me put the page there, because there you can have the meta-analysis and peer review, and they put in a very nice videos that explain very slowly how the science, and they put parts of the papers and they show. And what I like is that the site is based on meta-analysis, not just one paper, but many papers. I'm gonna put it here.
well,
Okay,
he had said many people had been involved and they had done a lot of studying on it. So, and I have seen other papers on it for the 2 cups.
My concern would be the non-specific nature of the directions or the statements. There are a lot of kinds of coffee, and I'm not talking about coffee with sugar, without sugar, with milk, without milk. There's a lot of chemical differences in the variety of coffee beans that are grown around the planet. So
Yeah, he did.
when he
express
just
that.
says coffee, it's to me about as non-specific as somebody saying, it's good for you to drink tea. What kind of tea? Are we talking about Ceylon leaf tea? Are we talking about a brewed, leaf that you put in hot water called a tea? So, whenever somebody makes something too general, I always go back and go, okay, coffee. What kind of coffee? Is it a particular chemical in the coffee? Is there a particular supplement I can take because I don't like the taste of coffee? It's not just how many people were in the study. Was it peer reviewed? Give me some more details on what you're trying to tell me. Don't just blanket it.
He did do that, and I didn't take the time right now to go into it. And so yes, he spent a lot more time with me and telling me different aspects, and like we discussed caffeine to a degree, and we discussed a lot of different things. And yes, please don't take it as that you can have a mocha chocolate. He said, something where you don't even have a coffee in it when you end up with drinking it. And we discussed that in great detail. And I believe him, and that I'm going to try to drink more coffee because my enzymes have gotten better and I haven't had anything else go out of whack because of it. And I guess everybody's individual, on how their body's going to respond to something too. So I wouldn't recommend it to everybody, but I just thought it was fascinating when you're talking about numbers and manipulations and things like that. And I fear that. I fear that for lots of different things.
Joanne, I posted the link for you. Go in that page and then go on a bar where you have the search and put coffee, and you're gonna see many videos, and you can watch. And some of it's not even videos; it's just like a voice, like a podcast. And he gives you all the latest news and aggregation of studies, just not one study, but the meta-analysis of the all studies. And he explained like antidepressants, inflammatories, and he like whatever kind of food you post there, look for coffee. He has at least like 10 videos about coffee, explaining like specific areas of the coffee. And he gives you not one study, but he gives you the meta-analysis that's the most important.
Joanne, I think Adam was going to ask you, did he suggest caffeinated or decaffeinated coffee?
No, he said it could be either. I was wondering which one she was actually drinking.
Okay, so if you guys interested in any kind of nutritional stuff, that's the best place for you to actually have the information. Because, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of science, the important is the aggregation of the studies, the building up.
If you were asking me about the caffeine, he did talk about caffeine too. And he
What-
did say that it didn't matter to him because it didn't affect the liver.
But what's your choice?
But you know, if I had something else wrong with my body, or, you know, there's people that can't drink caffeine. And so he said that was a different department to be addressed with if I had a problem. Then I'm going to do this for life. I'm just doing it to I hope not to do it for life because I can't.
Okay.
Okay, so which is
So-
your
so you
preference?
just- What?
Was your preference caffeinated or non-caffeinated?
Caffeinated.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Joanne, I don't know if you listened to, because I don't know if you were able to. I posted on the chat, but you might have lost it, so I'm going to post again. Is the site where you can actually take a look and see the nutritionfacts.org, where you can see all the meta-analysis of all the studies.
okay. I thought it might be a short session tonight, and it's kind of normal time. We're only 30 minutes away from the bewitching hour. Any other things we need to talk about this evening before I cease recording?